K. The neighbourhood of Oak Ridge Estates at 3:14 a.m. is defined by a heavy, expensive silence. It is the kind of neighbourhood where the streets curve gently around manicured lawns, where security systems hum quietly in the background, K, and where the population is overwhelmingly insulated from the harsher realities of the city. But on this humid Tuesday morning, that silence was about to be shattered by a man who treated his badge as a license to terrorize rather than protect. Detective Troy Rollins of the City Narcotics Division sat in the passenger seat of a blacked-out tactical vehicle, his heart hammering with the adrenaline of an impending raid. Rollins was 32 years old, with the kind of muscular build that suggested hours in the gym, and a sneer that suggested those hours had done nothing to improve his character. He was an arrogant, glory-seeking detective who had built his career on cutting corners. For months, his arrest numbers had been slipping. Desperate for a high-profile bust to secure a promotion, Rollins had fabricated a confidential informant, forged a sworn affidavit, and convinced a sleepy magistrate to sign a no-knock warrant for a suspected high-level distribution hub. He didn't bother to conduct basic surveillance. He didn't verify the address. He simply pointed his SWAT team at the largest house on the block and prepared to kick the door in. He believed with absolute certainty that nothing could touch him. At 3:17 a.m., the tactical team stacked up on the front porch of the sprawling brick home. The heavy steel battering ram swung forward, connecting with the reinforced front door with a metallic crash that echoed across the neighbourhood. Door splintered inward. Flashbang grenades were tossed into the foyer, detonating with a blinding, concussive force that shook the foundation. "Police! Search warrant! Get on the ground!" Rollins screamed, his voice amplified by the enclosed space, leading the charge into the home with his weapon drawn. Heavily armed officers flooded the living room, their weapon-mounted lights cutting through the lingering smoke of the flashbangs. They did not find drug runners. They did not find armed cartel members. They found a 68-year-old minority woman standing at the bottom of the grand staircase. She was wearing a silk pajama set and a cashmere robe. She was not screaming. She was not panicking. She stood perfectly still, her hands visible, her breathing controlled, her calm eyes taking in every detail, the badge numbers, the tactical gear, the positioning of the officers invading her home. Rollins marched up to her with the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest made him untouchable. "Get on the ground right now," he barked, pointing his rifle directly at her chest. The woman did not flinch. She had been in rooms with far more dangerous men than Detective Rollins. She had sat across tables from people who held actual power and used it without blinking. She knew the difference between authority and the performance of authority. "Officer," she said, her voice a calm, resonant baritone that carried easily over the shouting. "You are executing a warrant at the wrong address, I strongly suggest you check your documentation." The absolute refusal to cower was the final straw for Rollins's fragile ego. "Did I ask for commentary?" Rollins snapped. He didn't wait for an explanation. He violently grabbed her arm, spinning her around and forcing her face against the wall. He pulled heavy plastic zip ties from his vest and secured her wrists tightly behind her back. "People just need to learn to follow instructions," Rollins sneered, the words hanging in the air like a verdict already rendered. Rollins forced the woman to sit on her own expensive living room sofa, her hands bound behind her back. The rest of the SWAT team was tearing the house apart, emptying drawers and ripping cushions, desperately searching for evidence that didn't exist. "You have no idea how much trouble you are in," Rollins whispered, leaning in close. "We're going to tear this place to the studs." The elderly woman looked directly into his eyes with a steadiness that made his smirk falter for just a moment. "Detective," she said quietly, "I am going to state this once, and I need you to hear every word. My name is Eleanor Washington. I am the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, and you are currently violating Penal Code Section 148(5) by falsifying a police report, and Section 236 for false imprisonment." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, Rollins laughed, a short, ugly sound. It was the laugh of a man who had heard excuses before and who had absolute confidence in his own power. "Chief Justice Wright," Rollins mocked. "And I'm the President of the United States. Lady, I have heard a lot of stories, that might be the best one yet. My credentials are in my study on the second floor," Chief Justice Washington stated, completely unbothered by his mockery. "Furthermore, my state-mandated protective detail is currently asleep in the guest house out back. And I imagine the noise has woken them." Rollins was about to deliver another arrogant insult when the heavy mahogany doors at the rear of the living room burst open. Rollins turned, raising his weapon, expecting to see a resident. Instead, he found himself staring down the barrels of 4 suppressed assault rifles. 4 men in full black tactical gear, wearing the insignias of the State Police Executive Protection Unit, poured into the room like a synchronized wave of shadow. They were the elite troopers, assigned exclusively to protect the highest-ranking officials in the state. "Drop your weapons, State Police. Drop your weapons now," the lead trooper roared, a tone that left absolutely no room for negotiation. The local SWAT team froze. The troopers didn't hesitate. They moved with terrifying mechanical speed. 2 of the heavily armed troopers kept their rifles leveled directly at Rollins's head, while the lead trooper rushed to the sofa. He produced a pair of trauma shears and snapped the zip ties off the Chief Justice's wrists. "Chief Justice Washington, ma'am, are you injured?" the trooper asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I am unharmed, Lieutenant," she replied calmly, rubbing her wrists to let the blood return to her fingers. She stood up and looked down at Detective Rollins. The arrogance had completely drained from his face. His mouth hung open in abject terror. He dropped his weapon, letting it clatter to the hardwood floor, and slowly raised his hands. "Detective," Chief Justice Washington said, her voice echoing in the sudden, deafening silence of the room. "I told you to check your documentation, K.A." The fallout was a tectonic shift that completely leveled the city narcotics division within 48 hours. The investigation that followed was swift, thorough, and devastating. The State Attorney General's office immediately seized all body camera footage, which captured Rollins's unwarranted aggression, his mockery, and his blatant refusal to verify the identity of the homeowner. But the investigation didn't stop there. State investigators secured warrants for Rollins's personnel file, uncovering a horrifying decade of systemic abuse, falsified affidavits, and racially motivated violence that had been actively buried by corrupt supervisors. They found text messages between Rollins and his squad, bragging about planting evidence and laughing about violating the civil rights of minorities. The criminal trial of Troy Rollins lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented the body camera video, the forged warrant, and the testimony of previous victims who finally had a platform to speak. Rollins sat in the witness chair, stripped of his badge and his authority, looking exactly like what he was, a bully who had finally met consequence. The defense tried to argue he had made an honest clerical error, but the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts, at sentencing, the federal judge looked down from the bench with zero sympathy. "You were entrusted with the authority to protect and serve," the judge stated. "Instead, you used that authority to terrorize. You believed you were untouchable. You believed the rules didn't apply to you, and for years you were right. But not anymore. The entire city narcotics division was shuttered and placed under a federal consent decree. The supervisors who had protected Rollins were terminated and faced obstruction charges. The state legislature, prompted by the scandal, passed comprehensive police reform legislation, mandating independent oversight boards and eliminating qualified immunity for officers who falsified warrants. Chief Justice Eleanor Washington returned to her bench the very next morning, her dignity entirely intact. She used the incident to spearhead a massive national initiative on police accountability. In a press conference later that year, she stated, "What happened to me happens every day to people who do not wear robes, who do not have credentials, and who do not have a protective detail sleeping in their guest house." The only thing that ultimately protected me was an institutional response that most citizens do not have access to. We must build systems that protect everyone, not just those with power. If this story resonated with you, Thea, if it reminded you that accountability is possible and that courage matters, take a moment to hit that like button and help more people find it. The system that protected corrupt officers, like Detective Rollins, is cracking, Kay. What remains is accountability. What remains is justice. We want to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts on Chief Justice Washington's incredible composure and what real justice looks like to you, Canned. Pass this video along to someone who needs to see it, because these conversations matter. And if you are not already part of this community, subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss another cinematic story where the truth always wins. Because every time we share these moments of justice, we remind the world that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward accountability.